Thanks again, Sarah, for hopping on to another episode of Untapped Stories. I know we've chatted a bit or gone back and forth over email for a while, so I've been super excited for this episode. I think for parents and young athletes though who don't know much about you, maybe they're seeing your page here and your face for the first time. I like to go back for every guest all the way to their origin story for sports because we're a youth sports focused podcast, youth sports focused company. So if you could let people know maybe what sports meant to you growing up, kind of like your early days, whether you were a multi-sport athlete, single sport athlete, and kind of whether it was just grade school, high school, college, whatever, how all those experiences shaped, who you become and the business you started today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. So yeah, I've played sports my whole life. Growing up, my parents exposed us to anything and everything. So I feel like I've kind of dabbled in a little bit of every sport. It was in high school that I really started to get into running a lot. So I ran indoor and outdoor track. I also played tennis and then CYO basketball for fun. So I played sports year round. I was really active. When I was in high school running, I was running, probably upwards of 30 plus miles a week. Um, and I was a long distance runner, so they just had us going. During that time in my junior and senior season, I experienced stress fractures both times. So that sidelined me, unfortunately. And it wasn't I kind of rewound then. Let me take you back to middle school. There was a sports dietitian that came to speak to our middle school. So I always had a little bit of interest in
Okay.
sports nutrition. She was from a local university. So I knew that nutrition was important. I had a positive relationship with food in high school. I knew that I needed to eat well, but what I learned was that I wasn't doing it right, and that there's so much more to sports nutrition than what meets the eye. So that's really where I gained a lot of interest. And from there, I pursued my degree at Penn State, and here we are.
And before we get into all the positive tips about sports nutrition and what parents and athletes should know, maybe can you explain a bit about what you're doing wrong in high school? Because I'm sure a lot of athletes listening to this are probably doing those same things right now. So what did you correct, or what would you have corrected if you can go back in time?
Great questions. So many things. So I think the primary thing that we notice among young athletes is that we just aren't fueling enough. If we think about being a youth athlete, we are in school all day long and then maybe even working and then playing sports and probably not getting home until 7 or 8 p.m. at night, right?
Yep.
You're going all day long. And the intensity at which you're practicing, practices are typically like 2.5 hours long. That's a long time to be active and at a high intensity. So in addition to that, we also need to worry about growth and development. We tend to forget that piece of the puzzle. So when we're thinking about athletic performance, we're thinking about, okay, performance. We want our athletes to perform well. We need them to eat well to perform well. Well, the growth and development piece is also critical, and growth and development in itself requires a lot of energy, right?
Yep.
So when I talk energy, I'm talking calories, nutrients, macronutrients, micronutrients, all of it. So if we're not consuming enough to simply meet the needs of growth and development, then tack on all of that performance aspect and the energy needed to support that performance, we run into trouble. So that's the primary thing. Is I don't think athletes tend to know how much they actually need to eat.
Hmm.
And when we're young, listening to our hunger and fullness cues is important. But when we're an athlete, fatigue, dehydration, GI distress from being in a high intensity sport can be impacted as well. So, it's hard to just rely on our hunger fullness cues. We
Yep.
typically need to go a little bit beyond that.
I gotta ask because we've had a couple other sports nutritionists, dietitians on. Before we get into the other questions that I had planned, just off the bat, what do you think is the scariest part about sports nutrition for athletes and families? Like, is it the money behind buying so much high quality food, which is a big pain point for families? Is it the time and preparation that it'll take for parents to actually go through this endeavor, or for the athlete to be that kid who's eating two lunches and two dinners and always worrying about this? Like, what stops? Because everyone, I think, if you're on social media, if you have a strong athlete, middle school, high school, I think you probably have at least by now heard that sports nutrition is a valuable piece to a training program. But like, why don't more people dive into it?
I think one is just the lack of education. So like me as a young athlete, right? I came from parents who always put, good, healthy food on the table. My mom always packed lunch for us. I was very blessed with that throughout high school. We had the resources to do it, but I think there still was this lack of education in terms of what it takes when it comes to sports nutrition, right? It's so much more individualized. I think too, you brought up a point about school, and not eating, enough during the school day potentially and needing to pack extra snacks and things. I think that's a huge barrier because, you know, in high school, there's not really a window of opportunity other than lunchtime
Yep.
to get nutrition in. You might snag something on your way to the next in between classes. So I think that's also a big thing that we have to work through. With my clients who are youth athletes, we talk about ways to sneak in fuel during the school day. But yeah, I think those two things are the biggest.
I remember walking in between classes in high school and like having bars or before a basketball practice at 3 p.m., eating like a massive Cliff Bar just to try to get something in. I think total side tangent, but teachers and schools, especially for the athletes, they should be more open to kids eating during class. Like you can in college. In college all the time, after a morning lift, we would just scarf down breakfast at like a 9 a.m. lecture if we made those 9 a.m. lectures. But when we were there, we would be eating food in the meantime. And it's just, I don't know. I feel like high schools, they put such an emphasis on like being so strict about the day and having kids be properly like in uniform, at least for my school at least, and not like deviating from the normal student. But if you're going to be a student athlete and you want the students to perform well, I think you should bend a little bit. But I don't know if you still see that nowadays or if that's changed. But
No, I do, and that's one of the big things. I'll write notes for my athletes and say,
oh, there you go.
this student can eat in class. But I even remember to your point, in high school myself, I would see, football players eating a PB&J in the middle of class. And I'm like, why are they doing that? Because it wasn't normalized, right?
Yep.
And if we normalize it, if we say this is something we need to make sure that our athletes are doing for their health, or anyone for that matter, it can become a lot easier to implement.
I can think back to those same kids carrying like a gallon of water all around. The football kids in college, they all had like two hands, both gallons full of water. I'm like, you guys are crazy, but they probably needed it more than us because they played outside. So, what about for parents and athletes who maybe they need like a quick hitter? So, what's your recommendation for day before, maybe a day of a game? You need a fuel boost, and you're kind of tired after school, or you have like a tournament over the weekend, 5-6 games in a day. What's just the easy to grab or easy to make quick hitter that parents and athletes can use?
We're talking like right before a game or practice. What's the timing?
Good question. Maybe, enough time to digest. So not a massive meal, not like a whole plate of spaghetti and meatballs, but maybe within a 1 to 3 hour window of game time.
The timing matters. Leading up to game time. So I usually say if it's like 4 hours before a game or a practice, have a normal meal that composed of carbs, protein, fat, and I always say color, so fruits and veggies, getting those in too. If we're more in the 2 hour window, then we kind of start to slim down to more of a balanced snack. And when I say balanced snack, I'm talking, a carb and a protein. So that might be, you mentioned Cliff Bar. That could be a great one. You could throw a banana with that, a little extra carbs, depending on the athlete's needs, right? Everybody is different. So we can't say every single athlete needs exactly this much. It could be some peanut butter crackers. It could be a banana with peanut butter. It could be, if we have nut allergies, the sun nut butters are great, or a cheese stick or something. So something with protein with carbohydrate. Carbohydrate's key. We need that protein to help control our blood sugars before the game. So if we were to just have a carbohydrate 2 hours before, our blood sugars are going to rise and then they're going to crash again. And then we're not going to be ready and fueled properly for 2 hours later to perform.
Interesting.
However, if you're going, an hour or less before, that's when you want to start to really think about mostly carbohydrate foods, because those carbohydrates are going to be quick acting sources of energy. So, if you're doing it 30 minutes before, maybe it's an applesauce, banana, crackers, pretzels, those type of things that are a little bit more easily absorbed, because that protein will block the absorption, and even fat will kind of slow down the absorption of that carb to be utilized as quickly as you need it.
I know we have a lot of young athletes listening, maybe for college athletes, so not as young, but still in the 18 to 22 range. What about caffeine? Do you recommend any coffee or caffeine pills before a game, or is that an absolute no-no?
It all depends on the NCAA regulations, or what sport they're playing. Caffeine can be beneficial. I typically say, though, for youth athletes, under the age of 18, the research between those aids that help our performance is a little bit lacking because of the ethics surrounding it. So we want to just be careful trying to say, a young athlete needs to take supplementation or make sure they're down in caffeine before a game or practice.
That's very fair. Unless you're my mother-in-law who claims she's been drinking coffee since she was like 3 with her mom in upstate New York. I'm like, okay. She drinks like 7 cups of coffee a day, and she's like, "You're fine. I've had it since I was 3." I was like, I won't be giving my kids coffee ever. Maybe if they want it when they're in their 20s, that's fine. But I'm not going to give it to them at 2 or 3 to wake up. There's no way.
Exactly.
And she'll probably hear this and call me out for it.
I love that.
That's cool though, because I just had a thought that half my teammates in college would drink caffeine before games, and I was thinking I never did. Maybe I could have used that little bit of a boost. I just didn't know if it would dehydrate you faster than just drinking water and Gatorade. So
Yeah, typically not. The dehydration piece isn't, caffeine is not as big of a diuretic as we typically talk about.
Okay.
So yes, it does dehydrate us, or it is slightly a diuretic, but there's also a hydration factor to it, right? You're still drinking the liquid. So it's kind of like I would say maybe a negative net balance there on the hydration impact.
what about on that then? What's maybe for less for college athletes, more for youth athletes and their parents? What's a typical myth or a typical what people think is a problem when they come to you that you just always have to debunk or put down? Is it that examples could be like carbs are bad, like protein's everything, or what's the number one thing people usually come to you with that you always have to shoot down?
So many things. One that I'm seeing a lot recently with, TikTok, Instagram, all the social media is the greens powders are big. So I just see athletes coming to me and saying like, I need to do this one thing. And I'll see this athletes and non-athletes. What is the one thing that I can do that's going to absolutely make or break my performance, for example? And that's not really the case when it comes to nutrition. We need to look at the big picture. So we really need to look at what are our carb, protein, fat intakes. We need to look at what are our micronutrient intakes. We need to look at our hydration. So it's big picture. Not one thing is going to be a fix all. When it comes to things like greens powders and supplements, I always say that those are supplements. And again, as I was just saying a few minutes ago, for those under age 18, the research isn't there to support safety in using supplements like that. So we really want to be cautious. Of course, if you're low in vitamin D or calcium, talk to your doctor or dietitian, and there will be specific recommendations for each individual. But more is not always better. We need to make sure that the individual actually needs that supplement. When it comes to, again, back to the greens powders, that doesn't replace fruits and vegetables. So we can't just drink a shake or a juice and have that replace the benefit that fruits and vegetables give us. Fruits and vegetables have so much more nutrition that's what we call bioavailability. So it's more available for our bodies to absorb and utilize effectively.
What about, and I have a couple follow-up questions on that. What about, because I've heard it before, if you make a smoothie, it's less, somehow, some way you lose the nutritional value from all the fruits and veggies that you use. Is that true? Or is that, well, you're going to
No, you
debunk
still get
that
all
one? Good for me.
All the nutrition is still there. It's broken down a little bit for you, so your body might utilize it a little bit quicker or digest it a little bit differently, but it's all still there for you.
What about for high school athletes then? 'Cause I know a huge one is protein powder. Every high school kid, I'm sure after a lift, I remember back in the day, 2 scoops of protein powder within water, you chug it grossly on the way home, and you think you're going to get so much stronger. You never do. But would you recommend that protein powder is a good thing for high school athletes? Is that kind of in the bucket of like not enough research and you should really just stick to healthy meals and healthy snacks?
Yeah, the supplement industry in general is really challenging because it's not a regulated industry. So of course, I see especially my high school male athletes, those are like the ones exactly as you said, they're doing the protein powders, the creatine, the everything, which, there's research behind those things, right? For adult athletes. Again, youth athletes, there's not as much research around supplementation.
Yep.
And again, the industry is not highly regulated. So if you are taking a supplement, you need to make sure that you're looking at that the supplement has appropriate third-party certifications, so that basically says what's in the supplement or what's on the supplement label is actually in that supplement.
Okay.
We just want to be careful with supplementation. In terms of protein powder too, a lot of us get the protein that we need if we eat properly.
Yeah.
So my number one recommendation for young athletes is always just to make sure you're getting your total daily protein needs met, which can typically be done by food.
What do those numbers look like? So just to maybe give parents and athletes an idea of such a generalization, but I'm just going to give you like a 5'10" male athlete. He's like 165, 70 pounds, like just a very normal standard high school athlete. what would they have to do? And they're active. They play 3 sports, fall, winter, spring, they're doing something and they're competitive. What would they have to do from a calorie standpoint? Maybe more importantly, a numbers and carb standpoint or protein and carb standpoint to hit their goals.
You're gonna make me get my calculator out. It's a lot. It's like when it comes, you said what, 165 pound, 5'10", and you said what kind of athlete?
3 sport. So football, basketball, lacrosse for more active.
Okay, so like high intensity. Probably over 3,000 calories a day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's for 5'10", 165. Jeez, I want to ask you about
Yeah,
6'4".
I don't have my calculator out, so don't quote me on that, but it's a lot because again, you think about the growth and development aspect too. So when we do these equations, we're looking at age, height, weight, activity level. So the age plays a role in that.
And when you, not to like go too far with that, I know you're probably would like a cheat code for the calculator, but if you had to do it like based on meals, would that really just be 3 big meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, don't skip them, and then like a couple of snacks during the day? Could that equal over 3,000 in a healthy format, or would you need more like micro dinners and micro lunches?
Yeah, so I typically say like get your 3 meals a day. Look at every meal or snack or time frame as an eating opportunity. So breakfast is super important because if we skip breakfast, then we're skipping an entire opportunity to eat something or get the fuel in to meet our energy needs. If you get a balanced breakfast, and then some athletes need it to eat every 2 hours to get their energy needs met.
Okay.
Most athletes are more like 3 to 4 hours. Again, it really depends on the individual. So, 3 or 4 hours later, you might have a balanced snack, and then lunchtime would hit, and then another balanced snack, practice, game, after a practice or game, try to get something in. I typically tell my athletes to bring, those shelf stable chocolate milks like Horizon brand, or there's store brands. So those are really great because you can pack them with you. Don't let it sit out at 100 degrees if you're in the middle of summer practice. But if you're able to put an ice pack in a lunch bag and take it with you to school and have it after practice, that's a great way to get something in before you get home, because typically you wait to get home for dinner and it might be another couple hours before you actually sit down and eat something. It's kind of a lot. I always say nutrition is kind of like a full-time job.
Sounds like
when you think about it. Yeah.
It's more scheduling and planning than anything else, I'm sure, but you can't just wing it, or else you'll never have the full amount that you need.
Exactly.
I heard I think it was the Watt brothers, JJ and TJ Watt, both NFL players. They went on a podcast recently and talked about how their dad throughout high school would make them, it was like 6 meals a day, 2 dinners. He would pack 2 lunches for school and like 2 sets of breakfast. And they're massive people, like 6'6", like 305 when they were playing. But a thought back, the reason I brought it up, the question I guess is for parents. Like that's the extreme of what parents have to do to get involved. But how important is the parent relationship in sports nutrition for young athletes?
That's a young athlete's resource to have the food available. That's my number one recommendation is, make sure the food is available at home. Have the fruits and vegetables there for your young athletes to access, but make your young athlete autonomous. If you're in high school, you can be planning out your meals and snacks yourself.
Yeah.
And that's where, meeting with a dietitian or professional can help, so that the athlete can understand what their needs are for each individual meal and snack. Because you don't want to overdo it either. We don't want to underdo it, but we also don't want to overdo it.
Sure.
Having the athlete actually do the work and put together the meals and snacks that they want and they enjoy, but having the parent help them through that, taking them to the grocery store with them, picking out the things they enjoy. Because at the end of the day, nutrition should still be fun and enjoyable, right? We need to get the nutrient dense foods in, but it doesn't mean that food can't be enjoyed too. If your mom is constantly packing your lunch and it's a sandwich you absolutely hate, you're not going to get the nutrients you need in, right? But if you're packing your own lunch and know that that's something that you enjoy, you might be better off and more successful.
I like the autonomous aspect. Seems like most coaches, trainers, like dietitians we've talked to, they all recommend, which makes sense, having the student athlete be pretty heavily involved in the planning process. There was a coach recruiter, or a football coach, who mentioned that for recruiting, he recommends all of his athletes set up their own profiles, send their own DMs. The parents can monitor it, but if you're the athlete doing it, you will feel so much more of a buy-in and not like you're just behind a wall that your parents are shielding you from. So I think it's probably the same thing here, right? Like I probably I didn't know how to make an egg until college, but like, well, I probably could have benefited in the meantime by helping my parents make healthier meals in the morning in high school. So even if it's just little steps, you don't have to be like a fully independent adult at 16, 17, obviously, but just getting a little bit of buy-in from the kids, I think will go a long way. So
Exactly.
it's not just all on mom and dad's shoulders.
Yeah, and that, I also talk about with my clients that we're building habits from a young age too, right? So
Yep.
yes, we need high, I'm saying high calorie intakes, but we need to choose the right things. So there's plenty of young athletes that are like, oh, I need X amount of calories in a day, so I'm just going to eat milkshakes and fries and cheeseburgers all the time. Yes, while that gives us the calories that we need, it's not giving us the nutrient quality that we need. So we want to
Yep.
build, and then what happens once you get to college or beyond college when you're done playing sports, and those are the habits that you formed. So you want to work on forming, good habits now. That includes, okay, what are the nutrient dense foods? How am I getting the most bang for my buck out of what I'm eating? And two, doing the things for ourselves so that, yeah, when you do get to college, you already know how to fry an egg or you already know what to put
Yep.
with your egg. Yeah.
Taking a bit of a turn. I'm just trying to think for young athletes, probably elementary school, even but middle school, high school in particular. What about food pressure and like looking a certain way? Do you get that a lot from athletes, or is the athletes that come to you more just performance focused, driven focused, or are they really worrying about what they're eating and how that's going to change how they look, whether it's male or female?
Yeah, I get it for both male and female athletes of all ages. Body image, I feel like no matter what our age, it just never fully goes away in terms of making sure that we're constantly instilling a positive body image throughout our growth and development. It's really challenging, especially with social media out there, that, we're constantly fed this idealistic way to look and feel. What I talk to my young athletes about is that every body is different. So everyone is not meant to be the exact same shape and size. We also talk about goals. So what is the athlete's individual goals? That might be in their sport, that might be what college they want to get into, what academic goals they have, or even socially or family, goals, that things that are important to them. And we talk about how nutrition impacts that. Because if you think about it, we're talking about performance. Performance is related to cognitive health too. So
Yep.
our brains are developing. If we don't have enough energy on board, there's not enough energy to go towards our brain functioning properly. So that is also going to impact our skill development and our ability to be driven and motivated. So that's all playing a role. So yeah, we talk about our goals and we relate that back to, how nutrition is going to help them get there, and talking about food and body image in a positive light. I never say there's good and bad foods. I say, there's more nutrient dense foods. There's things that are going to benefit us more. And then there's the fun foods, the foods that are going to be sprinkled in. We're not going to eat them all the time, but they can absolutely be part of a balanced diet. And it's not going to make or break anything for us.
I was trying to think because we had a sports dietitian on a couple months ago. Her name was Maddie. She was awesome. She was the former sports nutritionist director at SMU down in Dallas, then kind of branched off and did her own thing. But she mentioned that in high school, she had, I guess, high school into college, developed an eating disorder and then lost her scholarship in college because of it. And she said, looking back, what she didn't know at the time is she just had to eat more carbs, had to eat more food. But she was a 5'1", 100-pound track and field athlete, actually, so similar to you. At I think where'd she go? Somewhere in Pennsylvania. But she said if she would have known those tips back then, she would have taken the advice. But I guess how maybe someone in Maddie's similar spot, they're an awesome athlete, again, male or female, but maybe for this case, just use Maddie as the example. Like, how would you get that across to someone like Maddie that eating carbs and like eating more is not a bad thing and it's not going to make you look a bad way? But when you're 15, 16, like you mentioned, and all you see probably for 5 hours a day in front of a screen is the way people look, like how do you get that across to them and help them to understand that you have the right messaging?
Yeah, it's really challenging. And, from a parent perspective, that's really hard. Sometimes I get clients who their parents, want them to come see me because the parent can't get it across to them, because coming from a professional feels a lot different than coming from mom or dad. So that could be a first step, is getting the right help. Somebody with a severe, eating disorder too, if you're losing a lot of weight or underweight, undernourished, that's really critical that the individual gets actual professional help. So through a doctor, dietitian, therapist, all of the above. In terms of, if it's not to that severity, we can start talking about, ways I like to talk to some of my clients about like who are some of their role models, right? Who do they aspire to be like? So is it a Saquon Barkley or a Caitlin Clark or a Katie Ledecky, right? Who are those athletes that they aspire to be like? And we look at what they had to do to get there. So that's something I
I like that.
use to try to instill things, because we could say, oh, you need carbs all day every day, but until you start to see an example, that can kind of help turn the wheels a little bit.
I like that comparison because at that point, I'm sure there's so much out there on those high level athletes about what they, nutrition wise, had to do to get to that point. And you're not going to look at Katie Ledecky's stack of food for the day and say she ate like a banana and a sandwich and that was it. I'm sure she ate 6,000 calories when you're swimming that much. So saying that to a high school girl is like, okay, well, if I want to be that good, then I have to do the same thing. And she looks great too. So it's not like you're not going to worry about like gaining weight that you shouldn't gain. You're going to be a great athlete. So
Exactly.
and in Maddie's case too, I know it was just to clarify for her, she had a D1, I think it was D1, and she was performing great, but it led to stress fractures. She wasn't really like I guess body image focused. It was more she thought she was performing awesome because she was so small, but didn't realize that at the time she needed strength, not less food. So that gave her honestly on her path to now where she is leading at one point leading SMU's whole entire like sports org. So she crushed it from that. But a lot of people just don't know that's the route to go when you're that young. So the education, like you mentioned at the beginning, is probably the most important piece.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think I kind of already touched on this one, but one of the bigger misconceptions that we've seen, because we had a couple people on before, are the different like not just protein powders, but in particular, like we got the last view that we put up or the last clip to put up from a nutritionist. It was like, is creatine worth it? Is creatine good? What would your take be on high school athletes for taking creatine as a supplement? I know you said supplements are kind of like, you shouldn't treat them as proper sources of food for high school athletes, but if somebody wants to take creatine, not that we're sponsored by any like product, but how would you go down that road of recommending, the right one to somebody?
Yeah, and again, typically because the research isn't there, it's hard to say, for a high school athlete that this is indicated. Yes, there's tons of research on creatine in adult athletes and it's super beneficial, but we want to be careful with the youth population. There's really nothing to say that we should be. There's no strict guideline or hard and fast guideline on that. So it's hard for me to say for a high school athlete, but in general, if you are selecting a supplement, if you're an older athlete, we want to look at making sure that they are third party certified. So NSF is a big one, informed choice and informed sport. Those are some of the more rigorous testing bodies. And like I said, supplements aren't regulated. And what I mean by that is that the USDA or Food and Drug Administration, they're not looking at the labels and making sure what's in the label is actually in the product. So by making sure that we have a rigorous third-party testing organization looking at these supplements, we can start to see, okay, this is actually what's in the product. Are there heavy metals or cross-contamination of things? Are there good manufacturing practices in place that we know this is as safe as we can attest to?
What were those three again? I'm going to call them out because I'm sure people don't know about them. I haven't heard of them before.
Yeah, but. NSF, so N as in Nancy, SF. That'll be like a blue circle with white lettering. And then informed choice and informed sport. Typically for athletes, you want to aim for the informed sport. That's a little bit more rigorous than the informed choice.
Maybe my actual last question. If you're a young athlete today, and I think everyone knows social media is so prevalent, is there anybody, besides obviously you and Athletes Untapped, is there anybody that you would recommend people to follow to get like good information about like maybe high level athletes that post positive messaging about nutrition, or like where can you go to not just get constantly, like you mentioned, body image comparisons when you go on social media, just somebody who's good and like speaks the proper language about what young athletes should come to know?
Definitely Conchi Nutrition.
Shameless plug.
And yeah, I mean, in terms of athletes that are putting out positive messages, I don't know any specific ones off the top of my head. I've seen plenty that do. Olympic rugby player. She was just on Dancing with the Stars.
I think I know exactly who you're talking about.
Alona Mayer or something.
Yes. I've seen her online.
She is awesome. She really talks about, especially for female athletes, like strong women, strong bodies. Yeah. And the importance of food as fuel for our bodies. That's like my number one take home message is food is fuel. We need to treat our bodies like, we're putting gas in a car engine. We need to treat our bodies the same way we would a sports car. So she's really great. And then in terms of just like general getting nutrition information online, social media can lead us down a not so great path with misinformation, but there also can be great information on there. And that's where I would turn to, make sure if you are following, a health coach or something like that, that they're a registered dietitian nutritionist, that they have the credentials behind their name. A dietitian is somebody who's gone to 7+ years of schooling in nutrition, making sure that the credentials are there.
Actually, great last follow-up question, because I always tease my sister about this. I know we talked before the show, but she's also a dietitian. But so the correct label is to be a registered sports dietitian, not a sports nutritionist, or is it kind of one of the same?
Anybody can be a nutritionist. The dietitian label is a regulated term. So
Okay.
if you see somebody as a diet, like I call myself a nutritionist because it's just a more, people know what that is
Yeah,
more
marketing
commonly. Exactly. So, but if you see dietitian, RD or RDN would be the lettering, that shows that there is that extra level of schooling. They need a master's degree now, 1,200 clinical hours, and a bachelor's degree in nutritional sciences. So there's a lot of schooling that is involved.
That's a next level up.
Yeah.
Way different than just putting your theories out there online.
Exactly.
That's really cool. And what about for, I don't know, for your business, Sarah, if you want to give a plug or a shout out? I know you said it's is it ConchiNutrition.com or Conchi Nutrition LLC? I forget the link, but
yeah,
anything else you want to shout out for people, it's all you.
Yeah, it's ConchiNutrition.com. So I see athletes or active individuals of any age. I do one-on-one private coaching, mostly virtually. And then I also do team talks. So if your high school or middle school or college sports team, you want to have a team talk mid-season or preseason, whatever it might be, to get some quick tips so that your athletes can be set up for success for that season. I do that as well. So yeah, I've done sports camps and all the things. So you can reach me at ConchiNutrition.com. And then I'm also on Instagram at Conchi Nutrition. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. I think that's Conchi Nutrition LLC or something.
Honestly, this is a super fun chat. I'm glad we did it, and it was a long time coming based on us connecting in the fall. But
yeah,
appreciate you making the time, and super excited to share all the clips. I think it's going to be really impactful for young athletes and parents. So
yeah,
appreciate you again.
Thanks for having me.